Era mi hogar, me duele estar tan lejos, oigo me están llamando.
Madre, no llegaré a la hora de la cena. Aparecí en un lugar que no era mi hogar. Dicen que ven mi cuerpo, oigo me están llorando.
Volvió el monstruo que acecha, el que despoja las tierras y el que pudre las cosechas. Tiene la mirada fría y carece de empatía. Su apetito es insaciable, tiene la panza vacía. No cree en edades, ni dogmas, ni formas, ni normas. Destruye lo que ve y no se conforma. Solo obedece intereses económicos. Infunde el miedo y entierra a soldados anónimos. Hermanos de otras madres que salieron de sus casas. Se fueron hace un día y hace años que no abrazan. Ese monstruo llegó al cañaruzal. Quiso azúcar de la vida y dejó peste con cal. ¿Por qué ser otro desaparecido? ¿Por qué darlo todo por perdido? ¿Por qué cambiar mi nombre y apellido? ¿O me quieren pasar por falso positivo?
Madre, no llegaré a la hora de la cena. Aparecí en un lugar que no era mi hogar. Me duele estar tan lejos, oigo me están llamando. Madre, no llegaré a la hora de la cena. Aparecí en un lugar que no era mi hogar. Dicen que ven mi cuerpo, oigo me están llorando.
Hay sangre en la arena y esta vez no es del torero. Son 5 chicos que salieron pero nunca volvieron. Uno de ellos resistió de una manera inexplicable para señalarle el camino y que lo pudiera encontrar su madre en medio de una escena con respuestas e impotencia y unos cuantos que no se entendía qué hacían allí. El dolor de familiares impulsados por el miedo, queriendo llevar sus hijos sin saber si podrían salir con vida a contarle al mundo lo ya sucedido. Si esta madre no se atreve, todo estaría perdido y estaría en archivo y otra historia para contar del país con la clase obrera que se muere en la impunidad.
Sangre, hay sangre en unas manos ajenas. Si me convierto en canción, solo recuérdame feliz. Aquí no pasa el tiempo, no hay pena o sufrimiento.
Ahora soy yo quien va a escandalizarse con la fuerza de los gritos de Ruby Cortés en los cañaduzales. Le exijo a la justicia que este caso se aclare y que no quede impune como casi siempre hacen. Nada, la vida de los negros no importa nada. Lo primero que dicen es andaban en cosas raras, como Jean Paul, Jair, Leider, Álvaro y Fernando. Somos víctimas del sistema y el abandono del Estado, pero el pueblo no se rinde, carajo.
¿Quién los mató? ¿Quién interrumpió sus sueños? Y eso no era justo. ¿Quién los mató?
Eran universitarios los de Samaniego, acabaron con sus vidas y con sus
¿Quién
sueños.
los mató? Ay, ¿quién los mató? ¿Quién los mató?
No hay propuestas ni protestas, nadie sale. La indiferencia social mata líderes sociales.
Pido justicia. Oye, ¿quién los mató?
Las masacres en el Urabá, por esos crímenes atroces, ¿quién va a pagar?
¿Quién los mató? Quedaron males son las madres, son los hermanos también.
El miedo acorrala, el llanto de una madre hace más eco que una bala.
¿Quién los mató?
No más farsas ni fachas, no se olvida el dolor de las madres de Soacha.
¿Quién los mató? ¿Hasta cuándo esta guerra que cobra vidas inocentes? Madre, no llegaré a la hora de la cena. Aparecí en un lugar que no era mi hogar. Me duele estar tan lejos, oigo me están llamando. Madre, no llegaré a la hora de la cena. Aparecí en un lugar que no era mi hogar. Dicen que ven mi cuerpo, oigo me están llorando.
Madre, ¿te acuerdas que te hablé de las estrellas?
That's where you train the elites. No, I'm joking. It's terrible, but yeah, it's a settler colony. That's exactly how I describe it. It's literally like a settler colony. We suck up all the resources.
summit.
Yep. Yep. Yes, I am. Yep, my mom's still there. Yeah, and my sister. Maybe once a year. I don't know. No, it's not. I mean, it's better going back because I just kind of like stay in the foothills and my little resorts. But yeah, like La Cantada.
Hello, hello. If you have misplaced your iPhone, please come up and claim it.
All right, that's number 2. I'm gonna lift this up if that's okay.
I want to say. I thought there were 4. The moderator will be here, but I'm not certain. 5. Okay.
Cam doesn't have it? Cam has it.
You can. Yeah, if you okay.
Cam, you have to start.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? That's right. We're really excited to bring you an amazing panel. We are going to be starting now. So if you have friends who are outside, text them, come on back in. And if you are standing on the sides, please, find your seats. Come as close as possible as you'd like, as close as you're comfortable with, okay? So, my name is Cameron Hurt. I'm here to introduce a very special guest. We're very excited to introduce someone who's joining us all the way from Berlin. Someone who's joining us as a great friend of the people, someone who is supporting the people's movements around the world, Sevim Dadelen. Sevim Dadelen has been a member of parliament for almost 20 years, since 2005, for the left party Die Linke. She's also a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the vice president of the German-U.S. Parliamentary Group, and the spokesperson for the Foreign Policy and Disarmament Committee. We're so excited to welcome a great comrade of ours, Comrade Sevim Dadelen.
Thank you. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for all the organizations who are organizing this great summit and this great response to the state summit of Joe Biden just here in the city. And I think I want to thank you on behalf of the Left Party in Germany for organizing this such great event. Because we believe, and we believe that we can only win by standing together, the vast majority of people in the North together with the Global South. Therefore, thank you for organizing this summit. Thanks for having us here, and thanks for being here. And I want to start with the issue regarding Julian Assange. The US Secretary of State has now warned of an ongoing threat to press freedom in Latin America. However, at the same time, Antony Blinken wants journalist Julian Assange to be extradited to the US and to be buried alive in prison here. The malicious double standard on the part of the US administration is not acceptable. If you document US war crimes, the CIA has free rein to plot assassination of you. You can be tortured and you will continue to be politically persecuted without mercy. Anyone who persecutes the journalist Julian Assange should forever remain silent on the issue of press freedom. And I think that should be a clear message sent by this People's Summit. We are no longer prepared to accept this dangerous double standard by the US administration. The fight for Julian Assange's freedom is the fight for freedom itself, dear friends. And the relentless political persecution of Julian Assange is symptomatic of a flagrant disregard for the people of the global South. The US crimes against Iraqis or Afghans do not count, and these people can be murdered with impunity. That is the terrible message sent by the US administration. The lives of people in the global South do not matter. That is another reason why this People's Summit is so important. We say that the lives of people in the global South matter, just like the working classes in the North. And we say that we oppose all attempts to exclude individual Latin American countries, the likes of which we are witnessing here at the official summit of the US administration. And in Berlin, there is a statue of Simon Bolivar that I pass from time to time in Berlin. And the base of the statue bears the following inscription: Simon Bolivar lives on his work. He lives on in the community of the peoples of Latin America. Simon Bolivar's message was that of Latin America's independence from colonialism of Europe and US domination. And with Simon Bolivar, we say today that the politics of the landowners and the colonizers must finally come to an end. Those who stand up for the emancipation of the working classes in the North must stand up for the emancipation of Latin America in the global South. And it is appalling that Russia's war in Ukraine, which is a violation of international law, is now also being used to consolidate NATO's global domination. But this war cannot be understood without the constant expansion of NATO right up to Russia's borders. At the same time, due to the massive arms deliveries made by the US and Germany as well, the German government, a highly explosive proxy war is now being waged in Ukraine, which runs the risk of degenerating into a world war. The US and Germany also want to wage this proxy war as an economic war against Russia, and an economic war that harms above all the population in the USA, with exploding energy prices and a true joy for the military-industrial complex like in the European Union and Germany, where we are witnessing a downright act of self-harm as far as cheap energy is concerned. The German federal government has also launched Germany's biggest rearmament program since the end of Second World War, to the tune of an additional 100 billion euro, while hunger in the world is exploding and precious little is being invested in climate protection or renewable energies. The global South, however, is not involved in this economic war of the North against Russia. No threats from Washington or Berlin will help here. The peoples of the global South do not want this economic war, which runs counter to their population interests. And that is a good thing, because we want to end this war in Ukraine and do not want a world war. And we do not want to freeze and starve for this economical war against Russia. But this war, dear friends, this war will not be ended by the delivery of heavy weapons, by a rearmament policy or by an economic war, but only by negotiations and a diplomatic solution. And this is why we say internationally, globally, no to war. Free Julian Assange. It is not those who expose war crimes, but those who commit them and cover them up who must go to jail and prison. And we also say, free the global south. It is time to put an end to the politics of domination and colonialism. And we say no to the economic war that affects the population in the north. And there is a famous quote attributed to Simon Bolivar. He says, when tyranny becomes law, rebellion is a right. The rebellion for our freedom has only just begun, dear friends. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Sevim Dadelen. Thank you for joining us all the way from Berlin, folks. All right, one more hand. So thank you again for joining us. We are about to start the next panel as soon as I make my way to the stage, so bear with us. Thank you. All right, how's everybody doing? Good? Well, I want to give a huge welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us for day 3 of the People's Summit for Democracy. Give a round of applause for everybody. My name is Cameron Hurt, and I'm an organizer with the Answer Coalition. And today we'll be talking about the movements to defeat white supremacy, state-sponsored violence, and the militarization of police and society. These are serious issues for all people of this world, and today we'll be talking about real problems and the people's solutions. We're here on the 3rd and final day of the People's Summit for Democracy, and we've heard from so many brilliant and powerful voices across the globe. This event is a great reminder that we are a part of one planet, and we face global challenges together. While Joe Biden's Summit of the Americas is focused on how to divide and conquer the entire world among the rich, ours is about how to collaborate and collectively solve the problems that are facing working people, that are facing oppressed communities. Give yourselves a round of applause for being a part of this beautiful event and making it possible. So the reality is that this continent has been plagued for over 500 years by the terror that is known as white supremacy. It's an illogical system, a violent system, and a system that serves a main purpose to divide and conquer, to reap more and more profits from the oppressed, and to continue that legacy of domination. This hatred is not natural. It isn't biological. It's a machine that's fed every single day by propaganda from the education system, to the media, to the neighborhoods, and to the politics of this country and this continent. The common thread of all these systems and these sources are that they are controlled by the elites, they are controlled by the rich, they are controlled by the wealthy. They determine what kinds of messages are going to be taught to our children, as we see with the attacks on critical race theory and the true history of this country and this continent. They determine what stories are going to be broadcast to millions or even billions through the corporate media. They determine who's allowed to live in the high-rises and who is forced to live in the slums. But what's most threatening and deadly about this is that the same elites that we're talking about control the police, they control the military, and they control the court systems that have absolute control over life and death under this current system. In this country and beyond, the rich continue to fan the flames of white supremacy and racism, because as long as one group of people believes they are inherently superior, it's easier to break solidarity, to keep the poor and the propertyless fighting for crumbs. This is a tactic that has been used for a long time to break strikes, to break up movements, and to destroy organizations, possibly for centuries. This is why violent white supremacist organizations and individuals are so frequently allowed to prepare and execute violence with impunity. When the masses are tired of living in these slums, tired of being exploited every day, tired of hearing the lies about our history, tired of the war on the black community, the immigrants, and the oppressed, we will rise up. We always rise up. We saw this in full force with the brutal murder of George Floyd That showed the people of the country and the world that unity was possible, leading to roughly 35 million people of all nationalities hitting the streets in the US, alongside over 60 countries, dozens of countries, from Palestine to Haiti to South Korea and across the world, arm in arm in solidarity. We remember the names George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Andres Guardado, Christopher DeAndre Mitchell, Dante Wright, Ma'Khia Bryant, Adam Toledo, Ahmaud Arbery, Andrew Brown, and so many more. These names will never be forgotten. There are truly too many people to name across this continent, and surely we will hear even more today and throughout the day. But I believe that one day we will have monuments, we will have statues, we will have memorials for all of those who have spilled their blood at the hands of white supremacist violence across this continent. But most importantly, we will have justice. We will have liberation. Our history shows that the struggle against white supremacy leads to unity among the oppressed, that unity is possible and that victory is possible. So I want to just start with that before I say that I'm very excited for this panel, where we're going to be discussing the lessons of the past and our path forward. I'm so excited to be joined by these amazing people that are surrounding me. Let's give them a hand, a rouse of applause. We're going to be starting with a video, but first I'm going to just briefly say the names of the folks joining me. We have Rafael Gonzalez Morales, joining by video. We have Dr. Sharice Burden-Stelly. We have Christian Delgado, Nikema Levy-Armstrong, JD, and Kyla Hartsfield. So now, joining us with a pre-recorded video is Rafael Gonzalez Morales. He is a professor and researcher at the Center for Hemispheric and United States Studies. Morales has a law degree from the University of Havana and a master's in international relations. He teaches on national security issues, specializing in information analysis, and he conducts research on the shaping of U.S. foreign and security policy. His texts have been published in Cuba Debate and the Latin American Context magazine. He has published 2 books with Ocean Sur, United States and the 4G War Against Venezuela from 2019, and Bolsonaro and Trump, 100 Days of Alliance Against Our America from 2019. Let's give a round of applause for Rafael Gonzalez Morales, joining by video.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Rafael González Morales, soy profesor investigador del Centro de Estudios Hemisféricos sobre Estados Unidos y quisiera comenzar diciendo que para mí es un honor y un orgullo recibir esta invitación para compartir con ustedes algunas ideas en este panel.
These armed militias today, we are talking about 300 militia groups comprising between 20,000 and 30,000 members. This map shows the level of activism and dynamics, which is quite a lot and comprises almost all of the states of the U.S. with a significant level of activity. There are 3 fundamentals we would like to highlight in the evolution of these militias. First, the so-called first wave, which has to do with the 1990s. And above all, we would like to refer to the second and third waves. That is, there is a significant increase in armed militias with the election of President Barack Obama, and the moment of greatest significance is in the so-called third wave, which is the election of President Donald Trump, where they took a very strong manifestation. We would like to highlight some elements that have to do with the ideological conception of these armed militias. First, they conceive that they have had traditional enemies. One of the traditional enemies is government and everything to do with gun control policies. But in the recent past, that is 4 or 5 years ago, they have constructed a new enemy, which is considered to be the immigrants of the U.S., left with left-wing protesters and progressive movements. From the point of view of, there are four significant groups, and they explain a little bit of the violence and their aggressiveness. They have to do with being geographically distributed in certain places and certain locations. They have a hierarchy, a strong component of military training, and they also have locations where they practice shooting and armament in the extended use of violence. In addition, and at this moment, they are using groups of mechanisms aimed at disassociating themselves from the control of the state in the process of inflicting their violence. Here we showed on the map between activism, May 24th and October 1970, the U.S. presidential election of 2007, we see a significant level of activity. We would like to refer to the most active ones. Thus, the so-called manifesto militias are divided into two large groups, the Oath Keepers. Most significantly, they originated after the election of Barack Obama. Therefore, it is a response to the African-American president in the United States supposedly going to increase controls regarding the firearms in the United States. Here we can highlight that they advocate and have ties to the Ku Klux Klan. Also, they stated in 2020 to be openly supporters of Donald Trump. In the case of Oath Keepers, I would like to highlight various dangerous elements. The members of this militia are active and retired members of the U.S. security, the police, and the armed forces. Here we show on the map the level of positioning in the states of the U.S. and almost all of the states. And we would like to end with the movement called Streets Movements, which are very violent. Within this group are the Proud Boys Patriot Prayers. In the case of Proud Boys, they originated in September 2016. It is a militia that emerges primarily focused on basically protecting Donald Trump in practical terms. We are talking about a youth movement that has a fascist orientation and are for Trump. 40 of its members were subjected to judicial proceedings for the events of January 6th, and at this minute it has 72 active chapter structures in the United States, which is evidence of its constant growth. How does the American public perceive these militias? According to more than 50% of the American public consider these militias a threat to the United States. In fact, 33% consider it an immediate and very serious threat. One of the peculiar elements that is happening in private militias and their operational capacity is that it is not possible to determine their presence on social platforms. Yes, we are talking about that they are using several alternative platforms like Parler, Signal, Telegram, and MeWe. And I would like to finish with a sentence that describes how dangerous this group is and how sometimes it is not very visible. And I would like to say, if it's possible, in English. Los miembros quizás están planificando acciones y están aumentando la seguridad en sus plataformas de Internet que sean más difíciles de monitorear. And we would like to close this with a segment that we consider very important, that these militias of these sectors of the Cuban American extreme right, and here we would like to make a connection. In South Florida, a very small but very active community of Cuban Americans systematically promotes hatred, violence, and historically planned terrorist activities against the Cuban people. Precisely, there is a group of conditions that emerge, and in that sense created conditions to emerge in that segment certain elements of the Proud Boys militia. I would like to comment on the leader of the Proud Boys. Our militia, Enrique Barrio, is Cuban. Born in Miami, he is a member of the Republican Party, and as you can see in the presentation, between 2018 and 2020, in 2018 he declared himself a national leader of the Proud Boys, and in 2019 spearheaded everything that was called the Latinos for Trump movement, which emphatically and in an intentional way promoted everything that has to do with Trump's agenda and his chances of being re-elected. And in 2020 he even became involved in a political race with aspirations to run for a seat in the 27th Congressional District of Florida. Here we show the evidence of the Republican machine and the level of figures close to Donald Trump, such as one of his sons, and also with anti-Cuban, Cuban-American figures like Ted Cruz and then Florida Governor Rick Scott. We would like to point out that this movement in South Florida was gaining a lot of momentum, and we would even like to refer to and culminate with this in the New York Times. In a recent article, they explained that in the Miami-Dade County Executive Committee, practically a dozen members of that committee are active militants of Proud Boys or were members of this private militia.
I mean, that is amazing to hear. And we know that our brother Rafael is only joining us via video because the United States government is afraid of these kinds of stories, these kinds of researchers coming here to talk to people. They're afraid of people hearing how life is in Cuba, from their healthcare system and the things that we have spoken about before, all the way to the race relations, to the issues that are going on there, and how the Cuban Revolution and the people there have continued to struggle on these fronts. But I think something we all are very aware of is that old slogan that cops and the Klan go hand in hand, as they say. We see that there's not just a connection between those groups, but significant overlap, to say the least, right? So once again, let's give a huge round of applause for Rafael Gonzalez Morales. That's right. Thank you so much. And next up, let's start the panel of folks who are here. We're going to start with Dr. Charisse Burden-Stelly. Dr. Charisse Burden-Stelly is an associate professor of African American Studies at Wayne State University. She's also the co-editor of Organize, Fight, Win, Black Communist Women's Political Writings with Jody Dean. And she's also the co-coordinator of the Research and Political Education team of the Black Alliance for Peace. Let us welcome warmly Dr. Charisse Burden-Stelly.
Hey, y'all. Just set my timer. You know, academics can drone on and on. So I just want to start by thanking the People's Summit for this kind invitation to speak among comrades and colleagues. I don't have anything new to really contribute to this conversation, but in the short time I have, I'll just sort of raise 5 points that might provide insight into what is to be done. First, I just want to start by saying it's imperative for us to understand entities like Africa Command, or AFRICOM, and the Southern Command, or SOUTHCOM, as strategic partners of the warmongering, imperialist, anti-radical alliances like NATO. And this anti-radicalism is actually really important, right? Because we know that NATO was started as a way to contain so-called communism, but not only that, also non-aligned movements, Black liberation and third world liberation movements, and it continues to do that pig work today. The sole purpose of these entities is to maintain Western domination generally, and United States hegemony particularly, irrespective of rhetoric about human rights, democracy, women's rights, etc. And we also must understand that domestic police forces and their militarization through programs like the 1033 program are merely localized manifestations of the warmongering, anti-human imperatives of AFRICOM, SOUTHCOM, NATO, etc. I'm trying to slow down for the translators because I know I talk fast. Okay. So to quote from the U.S. Out of Africa Network's most recent AFRICOM Watch Bulletin, which everyone committed to African liberation should be reading, quote, both SOUTHCOM and AFRICOM are extensions of NATO and the militarized assault on the democratic and human rights of Africans by the U.S. with the support of neo-colonial forces, as well as an attack on the self-determination of African people and nations in the Americas, the African continent, and the world. Domestic and international repression by the U.S. security state are linked. Our oppression crosses borders. So must our solutions. All who support the right of the people to authentic democracy and human rights should stand in solidarity against neo-colonial rule and the imperialism it protects, end quote. Which leads me to my second point. If it is that the imperialists are internationalists, we must be also, right? If we take the idea of Nuestra America seriously, then when we ask whose streets, we have to move beyond the United States to include, for example, favelas in Brazil, garrisons in Jamaica, African and indigenous territorios in Colombia, and so-called slums in Haiti. Internationalist consciousness and solidarity, in tandem with community and grassroots organizing and mutual aid, provides us with an expansive vision of politics that in the US is too often reduced to voting for one or the other faction of the ruling party. As Julius Nyerere put it, the United States is also a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they have two of them. Which leads me to my third point. The militarization of borders on stolen land and the brutalization of peoples who largely come from countries the United States has been integral to plundering and destabilizing, who are seeking reprieve in the United States under extreme duress. This is inextricable from the ways police operate as occupying forces in racialized and poor communities. And just quickly to think about Haiti for a second, the relationship between the brutalization of immigrants and imperialism is most manifest, or is extremely manifest, with regard to the treatment of Haitian immigrants. They account for 6% of the immigration population, but 60% of the deportation flights, not least because the United States, alongside the United Nations and the core group, have abrogated Haitian sovereignty and operate as an occupied force in Haiti, which allows them to facilitate these deportation flights. And so all of these structures of domination are linked. So the police forces that facilitate gentrification, which is settler colonialism in another form, they also act as the stormtroopers for the warehousing of so-called redundant labor, activists and organizers who contest these brutal conditions, and radicals whose envisioning of and agitation for economic and political democracy is treated as subversion. Speaking of subversion, don't be distracted by the empty rhetoric of this January 6th committee and its ostensible opposition to fascism and white supremacy, because this administration is not only arming, but valorizing and installing those very same elements abroad. Point number 4, the streets belong to the people, period, right? The people. Everything we do must follow from that fact. Politicians, or as I like to call them, elected influencers, will not save us. Not even your progressive faves. The comprador and the petty bourgeois classes will not save us. Celebritized activists who position themselves in front of or above the people will not save us. Academics, least of all those who have not committed in word and deed to being guerrilla intellectuals, will not save us. In fact, in his text, Groundings with My Brothers, Walter Rodney states, the Black intellectual, the Black academic must attach himself to the activity of the Black masses. Black intellectuals, all of us, are enemies of the people until we prove otherwise. So we need to cultivate more comrades, not more so-called leaders appointed by God knows who with accountability to nothing and no one but getting a bag. This also means that we must not only join organizations, but help to build up those organizations and model the ethical ways of relating to ourselves, our comrades, and our responsibilities in those organizations, right? When we trust the people and question those who purport to represent them with the same force that we currently fear the people and elevate those who purport to represent them, the basis for building a new society can be actualized. Which leads me to my final point. It is my hope that our battle cries, El pueblo unido jamás será vencido, land back, forward ever, backward never, free 'em all, from the river to the sea. Okay, from the river to the sea. By any means necessary, Cuba sí, bloqueo no, I can't breathe, US out of everywhere, and my organization, no compromise, no retreat, right? May our words sustain us in organized action and international solidarity against the overwhelming intersections of exploitation, oppression, and repression. Because in actuality, we can defeat capitalism, imperialism, neocolonialism, heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, warmongering, and ecological degradation, and all of their extraordinary and quotidian manifestations. Because in all of this, I do believe that we'll win. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Sharice Bird and Stelly, a true guerrilla intellectual, yes?
Absolutely.
I believe so. There we go, there we go. Well, thank you so much for that. I really loved the fact that, as we have to, you know, this conversation started and was centered around Africa and the United States and their continual drive for domination, pushing to continue to conquer Africa as well. And I love that Julius Nyerere quote as well. I just want to bring that up because we all know that the United States is the worst of the one-party states in the world by far. Now, with that, we're going to continue with the panel. We're going to go to Cristian Delgado, who is a social activist and leader in the Marcha Patriótica movement, which is a meeting place of organizations and struggles in Colombia who have decided to exercise their own politics. Marcha Patriótica aspires to be an organized expression of the movement of resistance and struggles of ordinary people from all corners of the country who, despite adversity, fight for a dignified and sovereign homeland. Delgado is a lawyer and specialist in administrative law from Universidad del Cauca. He has also studied constitutional law from the Universidad Nacional and human rights and culture of peace from the Universidad Javeriana. We want to give a huge round of applause. Thank you for joining us, Cristian Delgado.
Bueno, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon to everyone.
Todas y para todos.
I am grateful to the organizers of this gathering for the invitation to participate, and greetings from all my compañeros and compañeras, indigenous folks, black folks, farm workers, from popular sectors, students, and women that day to day we resist in Colombia. And I'm also grateful for the opportunity to continue learning, to get to listen to one another, to liberate our country, and to continue building a better world for all of us. About the issue, the topic of the panel, it was an internal discussion on how we would talk about this issue. And our Cuban compañeros who were here, and we were hearing about Fidel about February 4th, the second Declaration of Havana. And Fidel tells us about capitalism and gives us a synthesis about the Russian Revolution. It speaks to us about what the people are being forced to be, and the battles of the Rio Bravo to Patagonia by the U.S. imperialism. And there have been multiple investigations about militarization, about police, and how it's impacting the people. And it's been a strategy that's been defined by the U.S. to attack a certain way of thinking. and in the current time it's communism. Today, being progressive and Democrats of this continent. In the case of Colombia, in 1962, there was a general from the U.S. came to my country to create paramilitary structures to persecute our compañeros that were communists at that time. From then on, there was a strategy generated of a dirty war and of violence that was physical and structural, and that it subverting the Colombian government, and they assassinated anyone who was seeking and looking to build a new country. We need to really point out that due to that militarism and insurgency that persecuted the social justice movement, and after the peace accords were signed from Las FARC and the Colombian state, they were able to identify more than 250,000 homicides. 9.7 million Colombians were displaced. Others were disappeared by forced disappearance. And we as a social justice movement, we are focusing on the peace accords, that when we combine social movement and developing policies for a better state in Colombia, many movements. My compañero of the Congress of the Pueblo, there was the march, the patriotic march, in order to reach a political solution for the armed conflict in Colombia. And this reminds me of the Patriotic March in 2012 and the national strike that led us to national forum where indigenous peoples, farm workers, Afro-descendants, we committed to develop a proposal for our country. We said we're going to stop fighting separately, but we're going to unite in order to mobilize, and amongst all of us, we will build a better country.
After that came a peace process, not only with the FARC, but also with the ELN, the Army for National Liberation. So one of these armed forces continued and accomplished a peace accord. And unfortunately, in practice, it has been left vacant, empty. Let me repeat, there were no peace accords implemented. But in addition to that, within my country, a genocide was initiated against the people who are advocating for human rights. So to this point, 1,034,000 of my comrades have been assassinated. As of me being in this summit, 4 comrades have been assassinated. 1 indigenous, 2 farm workers, 1 Afro-descendant, and one of them was part of the LGBTQIA+ community. Just in my country, these are the people who are being massacred. But in spite of this and all of the situations that we face, we continue creating resistance. We continue building resistance. So now it's not just agrarian and urban sectors joining, but we also join labor sectors. And we were able to call for a national strike in which many groups joined forces that were informal, unincorporated organizations, people that don't have affiliations to organizations. They joined this national strike that we convened for the defense of human life, for land, for democracy and peace within my country. So we need to highlight and emphasize that this national strike, maybe if maybe it didn't have like a concrete materialization, it served its purpose to help us organize ourselves. Secondly, it helped us continue to build unity amongst those of us who are most marginalized. And third, it helped us to re-energize this resistance, this struggle for resistance, and redirect it into a struggle for political power. So today, the social movement goes hand in hand with political sectors in Colombia. We are so close, on the brink, to becoming part of the government in Colombia. We are pushing for organizations to be part of this government, take power in our government. And so today we see a threat, the threat of military intervention, which serves a purpose to destabilize these popular social processes that have started. So we need to highlight that here in the United States, the right-wing candidate is allied with some of the right-wing politicians that are allied in Colombia with political forces that assassinated the political leader in Haiti. And so we need to make that connection as well of the forces that joined to assassinate the mayor, one of the mayors in Paraguay. And so I'm summoning you all to convene and unite, because another world is possible. Un aplauso para Cristian Delgado otra vez.
Excellent to hear that, because we know that even before the time of colonization, the history of the Americas has been connected. It's been a long connected history, and through political assassinations, through so many threats on the current campaign, through the masses of Colombians hitting the streets, we see that the people of Colombia will never give up. That's right. So we're going to continue the panel now. I would like to welcome Nekima Levy-Armstrong, J.D., who is a renowned civil rights attorney, an ordained reverend, a former law professor, a freedom fighter, legal scholar, and national expert on issues at the intersections of race, public policy, economic justice, public education, juvenile justice, and the criminal justice system. She is the author of several articles and essays focused on racial justice, poverty, incarceration, and the war on drugs. Nekima is currently the executive director of the Wayfinder Foundation and founder of the Racial Justice Network in Minneapolis. Please welcome Nekima Levy-Armstrong.
Whose streets? Whose streets? Whose streets? Whose streets? Whose streets? We got to remember that as we stand up and fight for what's right. These are our streets. Even though the current governmental apparatus and history tries to tell us otherwise, we know that the system was not designed to work for the benefit of Black people, indigenous people, other people of color, and any folks who consider themselves to be on the margins. We know that we live in a nation that was built on the backs of enslaved peoples. People who never got reparations, who have not received justice, and whose humanity is still not being acknowledged. So when we take to the streets and we say, whose streets? Our streets. We have to remember that we are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, those who did not get these opportunities to speak truth to power without having significant repercussions. So I want to take us back a little bit and talk about some of the issues that we are dealing with in our society, as well as some of the solutions that I think that need to come forward.
I'm grateful to be a part of the People's Summit for Democracy. I'm really grateful for this brilliant panel. Let's give them another hand. I've learned so much just soaking up their knowledge and wisdom in this short period of time. But one of the things that I think is most important for us to remember, right, and you guys are here because I think you know this, and that's the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality continues. And when I think about the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality, I can't help but think about my ancestors. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, as a descendant of enslaved persons, and my grandmother picked cotton. And so as a child, I remember soaking up their knowledge and their wisdom. And they didn't have a formal education or degrees, but I've noticed that they're some of the most brilliant people who ever walked the face of this earth, right? And even though you have many of us up here who have degrees, our degrees are not what makes us. Our degrees are just a tool so that we can articulate truth to power in their forums and their venues and demand the kind of changes that we need to see. Because they expect us to come just one way. But when we're standing up for justice, we have to have multiple ways of fighting back. If we look at what happened during the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, of course we had black adults, we had allies, we had people from other racial groups standing up with black folks calling for an end to Jim Crow segregation and oppression. But one of the groups that stepped forward who does not receive enough recognition are the children, who stood up during the Children's March. They walked out of school, they braved fire hoses, they braved police dogs, they went to jail, they were brutalized, and yet they continue to stand up. And what do we see happening today? Our children are still on the front lines fighting for racial justice, freedom, and equality. Think about the current movement that we are dealing with right now when we talk about Black Lives Matter, when we talk about ending police violence. It takes me back to 2012 when Trayvon Martin was killed. He himself was a child, a 17-year-old child, walking down the street who did not make it home because of white supremacy, because of white violence, because of white people in that community thinking that they were the police, that they are the authority over black bodies. And then we saw a court system rubber stamp that reality and not hold anyone accountable for the murder of Trayvon Martin. But what did the young people do? They rose up in that situation, and there were marches all across the nation. And then we have to remember what happened after that, how the momentum continued to build. Let's move to 2014, August of 2014, when Mike Brown, another 17-year-old young black man walking down the street, gets shot and killed in broad daylight. And what did the witnesses say? That he had his hands up saying, "Don't shoot." And instead of being silenced and refusing to stand up or being afraid, young people rose up in Ferguson, Missouri, and really took the movement to the next level. Now, I went to Ferguson, Missouri in November of 2014 as a legal observer. And what I witnessed there was I heard Rafael Gonzalez Morales, he talked about the Oath Keepers. So anybody who went to Ferguson, we saw the Oath Keepers standing on buildings that they didn't own in a community that they didn't live in with high-powered weapons pointing guns at protesters. And all I could think of is, what if these were black men? What if these were brown men standing on top of these buildings? The police would not have allowed it. As a matter of fact, the police were very comfortable in Ferguson with that situation. And so it reminded me of the fact that, again, two Americas, right? One for white folks and one for people of color. So when we say whose streets, we're trying our very best to take back our power against a system that was designed to oppress us. And we have a blueprint, right? Again, those who came before us. So in the city of Minneapolis, we followed that blueprint. We followed it before George Floyd was killed. We took the energy from Ferguson, Missouri, we brought it to Minneapolis, and we started taking to the streets. shutting down freeways, shutting down the Mall of America, disrupting the government officials at City Hall. We held an 18-day occupation outside of the police precinct after Jamar Clark was killed in November of 2015. A 24-year-old young black man minding his own business, standing at the back of an ambulance, who was shot in the head at point-blank range by Minneapolis police officers. Now, anybody who's been to Minneapolis, you know how cold it is. Freezing cold. But guess what? That didn't stop the people. We stayed outside day and night for 18 days, standing up for justice for Jamar Clark. We refused to leave. We refused to be silenced. We refused to sit on the sidelines. We refused to stay in our place. And then what happened less than a year later? Philando Castile was killed. And what did we do? We went outside of the governor's mansion 21 days and held an occupation. People camped out there trying to get the attention of government officials. And after that, more people were killed, and we continued to rise up. So that on May 25th of 2020, when the world witnessed a black man being lynched in Minneapolis in the midst of COVID-19, in the midst of destruction and despair, we rose up. We planned that first protest in the middle of the night. We didn't know if anybody was going to show up, but we said if it's 5 of us there, we're going to show up. We're going to stand against police violence. We're going to call for these cops to be fired. We're going to call for these cops to be prosecuted. We're going to call for an overhaul of this system that continues to oppress us. And thankfully, not just 5 people showed up, thousands showed up. And not just Minneapolis, but across the state, across the nation, across the world, of people being energized to stand up and fight back and ask the question, whose streets? Our streets. So we have to take that same energy as we move forward into 2022 and beyond. Because some people got comfortable after Derek Chauvin was convicted. Some people went on back to business as usual as if it wasn't happening, but as black people, we can never go back to business as usual. We are constantly under the threat of state violence and abuse and laws being passed that continue to oppress us. So we have to rise up. We have to stand up. We have to wake up. We have to remember that our work is far from over. Those who have come before us, their blood is crying out from the ground, calling on us to take action. If not now, then when? If not us, then who? Whose streets? Whose streets? Whose streets? Whose streets? So my time is about up, but what I want to do real quick as I conclude is say that, number one, the 1033 program, which was mentioned earlier by my colleague on the panel, that is the program that allows police departments to receive high-grade military weapons from the U.S. government. That program needs to be completely repealed, overhauled. All those weapons need to be brought back to where they came from and destroyed. They don't need to be used in our inner city communities, black communities, Latino communities, Asian communities. They don't need to be used anywhere. They need to go back where they came from. And along with that, we must renew our call to end the war on drugs. I know we out here in California where you can get that kush, you can get whatever you want, but as you're partaking, remember there's people behind bars for the same damn thing that we're able to do today because white businessmen decided that they wanted to make money, that the government decided they wanted to collect taxes, but it's been on the backs of black and brown people still behind bars. So the war on drugs must come to an end. All power to the people. Thank y'all for having me.
A huge thank you to Nikema Levy-Armstrong. That was excellent, wasn't it, folks? That's right. I just love that, the truth that I want to echo from that statement. There is no going back to business as usual. There is no going backwards. That's right. And here at the People's Summit for Democracy and with all of these excellent people, we are moving forward into a new future. That's right. Thank you so much again. And for our last speaker on this panel, we are going to introduce Kyla Hartsfield, who is amazing. They know you. That's what's up. That's what's up. You know. Kyla Hartsfield is a black queer woman based in Durham, North Carolina. After studying many black women organizers that came before her, she was led to deepen her commitment to black liberation, and she dedicated herself to organizing starting in 2017. In the past 5 years, she has worked on and been stretched by hashtag #EndMoneyBail and hashtag Durham Beyond Policing campaigns, and others around decarceration and environmental justice. After spending long days dreaming and scheming of a world without cages and borders, she loves to unwind by singing too loud and dancing too hard. Let's welcome Kyla Hartsfield, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I would love to start this off with a chant that I know that everyone could say. It always makes me feel comfortable and catch a vibe. Okay. And I'm gonna say it, and you can just jump in when you're ready, okay? I love black people. You don't love black people? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I love black people. You don't love black people? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I love black people. You don't love black people? Everyone can say this. What's wrong with you? I love black people. You don't love black people? What's wrong with you? Let's say it one more time, and I really want to feel how you love black people. I love black people. You don't love black people? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Thank you. So my name is Kyla Hartsfield. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in Durham, North Carolina. I'm Southern. I'm an organizer, a sister, a daughter, a friend, a comrade, a forever student, and a member of BYP 100. BYP 100 is an organization for black youth 18 to 35 that organizes through a black queer lens. We have had campaigns around defunding and abolishing police and prisons, as well as combating and ending gender-based violence. If you would like to know more about our organization, which you should, there's 2 rows of members right in front that you can ask more about. Today, I want to start off talking a little bit about myself and organizing as well as safety. I first started imagining myself as an organizer in summer school of 2017 at North Carolina Central University in a class called Black Women in Activism that was taught by Dr. Muhammad. Every single article we read about black women organizers talked about them changing their communities, but also talked about how while changing their communities, they gained self-transformation, dignity, self-esteem, self-love, and how you cannot do this work without being transformed. The first campaign that I worked on was #EndMoneyBail, where I didn't know I was an abolitionist, but I quickly found out. I worked with an organization called Southerners on New Ground. That's a Southern LGBTQ organization fighting to end the prison industrial complex, which we also call the Big Beast. We saw our positionality in that fight and ending money bail in the US South. In our campaign, we did research of our local jails and courts. We held Team of the Willing dinners where we found collaborators and built out our teams. We held community members. We met with sheriffs and DAs and had multiple conversations about the money bail system, criminalizing people because they're poor. No matter how much, no matter what the charge, if you have money, you can get out. And if you don't, you have to stay in and your situation gets worse. We brought public attention to this injustice by following in the tradition of our ancestors, collectivizing our resources, and being able to purchase each other's freedom, also known as Black Mama's Day bailouts. We started by sending letters into jails and asking folks, if they wanted to be bailed out, because locally, our jail conditions are horrible, but also it's the only place that you can get free mental health services. And we wanted to have folks consent for being bailed out if they wanted to or not. The week before Mother's Day, we was set up outside the jail with a table full of flowers and gift bags to welcome moms back in community. We decided to focus on Black mamas, caregivers, Black gender nonconforming folks, Black trans women, because the narrative around incarceration at the time was only Black men were incarcerated, as well as we wanted to make it loud and clear that these folks are pillars in our community, and when they are in cages, our community suffers. After we bailed out folks, we connected them with social workers that we hired for 90 days and organized court support for each time that they had to attend. And court support looked like giving them a ride to court, arranging childcare, and community members attending with folks to go to their court. When you're about to be booked, a magistrate, which is basically a judge that is in the jail, conducts a risk assessment to identify if a person is a risk to society. And they ask questions of, do you have housing? Do you have a car? Do you attend school? Which are all questions related to class. We flipped it and we would ask folks that we wanted to bail out, what do you need to get back to jail? And we'll hold needs assessments, which folks would say childcare, transportation, a reminder. And instead of spending money on our county jail, the money can be spent on free mental health services, increased childcare, free housing, as well as upping our transportation system. Because in North Carolina, you need a car. Another campaign that I worked on is Durham Beyond Policing, where I joined in 2019. Where I joined to actually close the campaign, but someone found out that the sheriff wanted to expand their budget and hire 70 new cops. And at the time, we were organized through an email thread of 80 people. So someone sent this email thread of 80 people that this is happening, and we organized collectively together to come up with a community safety wellness task force proposal to spend the money on instead, which would be a city-held group of people that would research other ways in Durham, North Carolina, outside of policing that could help keep folks safe. Like, for example, if you call 911 in Durham, the police are gonna come, and especially in multiple situations where folks have struggled with untreated mental health issues, folks do not leave the situation, and there could be situations where mental health professionals are sent to the scene instead of the police. Lastly, I want to talk about right before I came here, our local chapter held a political theater where we were speaking out against ShotSpotter, which is surveillance technology that detects gunshots as a sound and will immediately send police to the situation. The technology is faulty because it will detect multiple sounds as gunshots, as well as it's used in predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods. And as multiple of the panelists have said, and as we have known, when the police have come to Black and brown neighborhoods, folks' lives are lost. So we have actually, City Council has voted it down twice, and they want to vote it, yes. And Mark Anthony Middleton is wanting to bring it back up again for the third time, and we spoke out against it. And we know that increased surveillance is creating invisible cages where folks are also not able to be free and live their life. And policing, prisons, borders, military, surveillance technology are all packaged to us as things that keep us safe. But in all of these campaigns, we have asked folks what does actually keep them safe, and they have said housing, food, transportation, healthcare, parks, education, a living wage. And We want to divest from prison and invest in all of those things. And I'm asking all of you to get really clear with what are the things that keep you safe? What are the things that keep you and your neighbors safe? And to demand investment in those things, and to demand divestment from policing, divestment from, I will conclude, divestment from policing, divestment from ICE, divestment from prisons, and invest in people. Thank you so much. Oh, I also want, thank you. I would be remiss without thanking my national director, Deatra Jackson, who was with me with my first panel. I was so nervous. She had to do it with me. And she's here once again. Thank you so much. We're so grateful for you to lead us. And it's a blessing that you're leading our organization.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. We can switch that one.
Oh, you want this one? Here you go.
I'll use this one. Thank you so much, Kyla. We really appreciate it. One more round of applause, folks. That's right. I just want to echo that Kyla brought up the question that is at the core of this panel, Whose Streets? The question of, are we going to invest the wealth of society into police and prisons and surveillance and weapons, or into mental health resources, housing, healthcare, education, transportation, parks, and living wages? We know the answer right here at the People's Summit for Democracy. We are so glad that you joined us for this amazing panel. Give a round of applause for all four of the panelists and Rafael. Yes, thank you so much. And I just want to say, the energy of this crowd has been fantastic, has been energetic. And we're going to keep that energy going all day. Is that right? Yeah. Are we ready to march later? Yeah. Are we ready for the amazing plenary that's going to be starting in just a couple of minutes in the same room? Yeah. All right. We really look forward to seeing you there. And I just want to end with this chant. Whose streets? Whose streets? Whose streets? Whose streets?